Okay, Trans Am fans, I am delighted to welcome to the Trans Am fraternity and family David Hoots, who will be with us this season and ongoing, and delighted to have him, a man who has so much experience and reputation within the business of motorsports, having been part of NASCAR for many, many years, and he will be one of our chief stewards and race directors, and I'm delighted to welcome him today. David, thank you so much for being part of our family. And tell me, first of all, how this opportunity came about for you.
Um, Last fall, John Claggett reached out to me and invited me down to Road Atlanta to take a little walk around and see what things were going on. And it created some interest. And we had some dialogues over the winter. And ready or not, here we come.
And for the people who may not know you or your work familiar with it, tell me a little bit about how you got into NASCAR and how much of a part of your life that has been.
Well, I started out before with my parents started taking me to the local short track for the entertainment value of it. It was something that we got in the habit of doing on Saturday nights. And as I grew up, I continued to pursue that. And then in the early teen years, there was some opportunities to get in and help on a volunteer basis score some cars. One thing led to another, and then I started going from there. And I was working on Saturday nights at the racetrack with a pretty good seat of the racetrack and getting to be around something that I had already enjoyed for 13 or 14 years of my life. And it just continued on to regional races and weekly short tracks and that until a national opportunity came along. And that's when Coach Les Richter reached out to me and said, "You want to try this?" And I probably should have not walked, but ran away from that. But it was something that I took on and did it for 33 years.
Well, it's interesting because, like you say, it sounds like you're a race fan, but being a race director, you're kind of the ogre, or seen that way. It's not necessarily the case, but when it comes to dealing with people involved in the racing, you've got to be the authority. You've got to tell them like it is, and so you go from fan to being teacher, or at least instructor to these guys. How hard was that to make that transition?
Well, there is some struggle with it, but the other thing is that you keep it at arm's length. You really officiate to the car, which is an inanimate object, versus the person. You know that a person's controlling it, but you're judging the actions of the car more than you are what the person's doing, even though they are ultimately in control of it. But you would stay at arm's length. You knew that you tried to be impartial, and you were not tried to. You had to be impartial, and you didn't want to open up the opportunity of somebody to look at you any other way. So you kept a kind of professional arm's length relationship, and that's one of the beauties of what was going on. It didn't mean at the same time that then when you walked out of the racetrack, you couldn't be friends or acquaintances, whatever, but you had a job to do, and that's what you were paid to do.
And the period that you were involved in NASCAR must have been exciting, because the household names that you would have had to effectively deal with and possibly even have to reprimand upon occasion. That must have been both interesting and hard, because, these are big names. I mean, Dale Earnhardt. I mean, every one of them, Jeff Gordon. I mean, you've come across all of them. So that must be in its own way a challenge.
It was. I grew up being a Richard Petty fan. Remember, my mom took him somewhere where he was doing an appearance, and it was almost like he was an intimidating individual, but he wasn't. But you being a young teenager or whatever, he was intimidating. Watching him and the likes of David Pearson and others from the 60s era that you grew up, because at that time of life, you started getting some video coverage not just reading about it. So as you had more opportunities to watch the races, the more you got involved with it. And I feel like maybe going back in the day a little bit, the coverage brought out some of the personalities in the sport that may not be there right now. And I think that's a shame.
You know, it's interesting. It makes me think that you have crossed a period where technology has advanced both in the cars and the races, but also in your ability in race control to observe, but also the race engineers and the fans' ability to observe much closer with onboards and so on and replays, slow mos. So, on the one hand, it's a great advance that you can make use of, but unfortunately, everybody else in real time is seeing what you're seeing. So, it almost makes your job harder because you know you're not just sitting on your own looking at your own monitor. Everybody's seeing what you're doing, including those involved.
Well, it does, but I will take something that was instilled into me from very early in NASCAR. Um, I would be sitting in race control doing what I was doing, and a gentleman named Bill France Jr. would come in and sit down, who had performed the same job years earlier. So he knew the demands of it, and he knew very much what you were doing, what you were trying to accomplish, and whatever. As we started to roll into the technology to help score the races and stuff, he gave me some advice, and he said, continue to use that legal pad and that pencil like you're using it right now. It will never fail you. And it's something that I stuck with until the last race that I did in the Daytona 500 2 years ago, that it kept you engaged into the game and you didn't get dependent just to what you saw on the monitor. And you would use the monitor as a cross check. But how many times we are guilty of letting the technology kind of let us slip a little bit? We would get too reliant on it. So if you don't know the basics of what you're doing, how can you recover? And then the other thing is that it was always a check and a balance. If you were forced into it, you could probably go back and still do it manually. Now, would you want to? There's no way in the world, but you could go back and handle that. And I think that in a lot of cases is becoming a lost art around the racetrack. You see a crew member that is sitting there complaining that his little handheld app isn't working. You mean you don't have a stopwatch? Well, no, I don't own a stopwatch. There's a stopwatch in that phone that you're trying to look at. Learn how to push a button, you know.
Yeah.
So we're all guilty of it. You used to remember all your friends' phone numbers on the phone, and now you take the phone and you sit there and say something, and it starts dialing, and you don't have a clue what the number is. So it's important not to forget your roots and how it helps you do your job.
You know, I read about one of the interesting styles you might have back in the day was that you would obviously have to reprimand maybe an engineer or let them know that they were in the wrong or that why you flagged them. And instead of necessarily calling them out or drawing them to the steward's office, you would put a message out to say that car 43 needed to be let know that this had happened. And evidently the message would come back, car 43 has been informed by the tower.
That's correct, and it goes back that there's a check and a balance. The way that procedure started out, you would get people say, we didn't get the message or whatever. and this assured that we as the stewards to the sport had delivered the message. And at that point, all appeal is gone. This is the ruling. Follow the directive, and let's go on so we can both go back and focus on what we need to be doing, which is to continue the race. So there was always this mindset of try to have a check and a balance to what you were doing. There's very coy crew chiefs and the like, team engineers, that would sit there and try to skirt the edges of the rules, and this seemed to stop a lot of it. So we've had that. We've had a friend of mine tells me about he was doing a job at the end of pit road, and a car owner did not believe him. So he came down there and he wanted to look at his records. And we had already instructed him beforehand. The records are yours, and you'll call it up to us and we'll review it from there. And he did. He said, well, son, this car owner wants to look at it. I said, well, tell him to get ready. I'm going to bring his driver down and let both of them review it so everybody's on the same page. And the car owner said, no, don't do that. I'll go turn around and I'll trust you. Good. And you got to build a little trust like that. So
yeah, going to say you need a relationship, but I mean, a lot of people don't really understand or know because they may watch from the grandstands or they may watch on TV, but very few people like myself get to see race control in action. And I've once heard the job described as herding cats. How would you describe what you do, and is that a fair description?
it can be like herding cats. Ideally, you have planned far enough in advance. You're really always trying to be 8, 10, 12, 15 steps ahead of what you're doing to make the order flow. You want to be consistent with those orders and that you're following, because if you're helter skelter, it just adds an element of confusion that's not needed. There doesn't really matter what's going on. You should sound like you're in control of it, maintaining kind of a steady voice, authoritative voice, and just walking everybody through what you're doing. You could consider that you're watching a bunch of monitors like a flight controller at the airport, or as simple as a band conductor leading the band as they play music. Sometimes it's controlled chaos. You may have stuff going on in the background. It really doesn't matter. You're focused on doing that, and you at times you don't have a chance to go back and look at a manual to tell you what the next step is. You probably need to know what the next step is and just react. And it seems to work.
Yeah, it really is one of those jobs where you have to make decisions on the fly. Time goes on and things move on, and it can get heated at times, but it does need a cool head. Let's turn to the future and Sebring coming up in a week's time. Are you excited to be involved in Trans Am, and why?
Well, I'm always excited to be in motorsports. Period. I mean, it's like it's a passion that I've had my entire life. Um, Excited to take on the challenge. I believe that we have a very good group of competitors and drivers and car owners, along with a good team at Trans Am. Um, I feel like it's right on the edge that it could just have some explosive growth if we all do things the right way. There's several opportunities coming down the pipeline that's going to help the entire thing. So it's a good time. It's very similar to probably some of my experiences 20, 25 years ago, as NASCAR went to a unified broadcasting package, and what you had to do with dealing with television and the like. Television is changing a great deal, moving from celestial channels to streaming, which is unique and different than maybe how you consumed a race in years past. So there's many opportunities there. There's nothing better in the world to be at a racetrack. I mean, it's just hard to beat being at the racetrack, and the camaraderie is there. And you could see the camaraderie when I went and did the site visit at Road Atlanta. The teams are there as much because they want to be, and this is their release, this is their outlet, this is their golf game. They want to enjoy it, and they also want to enjoy the camaraderie. Now, between the fences and inside the garage area, they'll do anything in the world to beat each other. Get them outside, let the truck be broke down or something. They'd be over there helping them put the truck back together, or loaning them parts, or giving them advice or whatever. So it's a very unique community, and they're they're dedicated and hardworking to do what they're doing.
You know, there's gonna be some interesting challenges too that are different. You mentioned going to Road Atlanta, and you saw us putting on a double header there because of COVID. Effectively, we had to run a few double headers, and that also included an all-class race. But we do TA and SGT and XGT together. Having different classes and effectively different races and different speeds, and also having a group of drivers from different walks of motorsport, whether it be youngsters coming up through K&N and truck racing as part of it, or someone like Chris Dyson, who's been around sports cars and IMSA and so on. So everybody's, played to different drum rolls and different race directors and different rules. That's going to be a challenge in itself to race direct with multi-classes and with guys of differing experience.
Oh, I agree. I've never experienced a multi-class race. I'm the first one to admit I don't know what I don't know right now, and I'm still trying to learn, which I'll be reaching out to competitors left and right. The officials have kind of already experienced me asking the blue meeting questions to find out what I don't know. I don't really have a problem in admitting that I've made a mistake and trying to learn from it and improve on it, but then reaching out to drivers and team members again to help critique what happened so we can speed up the learning curve. And then try to look for best practices across the board. At the end of the day, racing's not all that complicated. You're taking a car and you're going around a track. Now, whether it's got 4 turns or 24 turns and the like, a lot of the components of the car going around the racetrack is the same. Mm. How they get there and the different things with the track makes it unique. So there's probably 75% carries over from one discipline of racing to the other. It's the terminology and the conversion of those types of terminologies and different procedures that I've got to lock in on, and I feel confident there's a good team there at Trans Am that can help me, and I will rely on them.
Yeah, it's funny, it goes both ways. We could also, with your years in NASCAR, do you also see the opportunity for you to bring your experience to this series? Because we can learn heavily from what you've learned as well.
Well, I hope to bring some of that. Again, I want to take a very pragmatic look at things. Don't just assume, because in my mind, it doesn't look exactly the way I think it should, because I don't have the historical data or perspective of how it got the way it got and why it's done the way it's done. And you have to ask questions and sort through it and see, okay, now on the surface, it didn't look right, but it's probably a lot brighter than you think it is, and you have to weigh that out. Then you want to go vet it out. I've got some ideas that I want to talk to some competitors and officials about to see if we can't simplify some things. I think that's probably the easiest way, and work on communications functions during the course of the race, which is the key to any effort. I don't have any concerns whatsoever about the effort that the officials are going to put forward on it. I think they're a seasoned bunch, but we can always improve in communications, whether it's letting the TV booth know what's going on and like that, or communicating to a crew member. Sometimes just how you explain it and the tone that you explain it in is good. It's going to be a welcome sight to be at the racetrack when all the crews walk in. And I've done that a lot of times for a lot of years. They've been working on the cars all winter. They have been pent up in the garages, sometimes where it's snow and whatever. they've also been dealing with 9 or 10 months of COVID that's taken a lot of the social function out of their life. And if you watch a bunch of competitors walk in that first morning and they're all smiling and happy, that's a good thing. And let's hope they'll have a great experience when they walk out and they're smiling and they're happy and they want to come back. They want to tell their friends and they want to tell other competitors. And we'll take that down the road and build upon it.
You know, you mentioned COVID, and I think it's a good point to point out that motorsport, Trans Am, Formula One, IndyCar are all in the debt of NASCAR for how well they reacted last year with Steve Phelps and putting together NASCAR and being brave enough to go out and do it first and do it responsibly. You've got to take your hat off to how well they were able to go racing in a pandemic.
Well, there's no question about it. And being one that had been on the operations teams at NASCAR, this was no small feat that they took upon. You're dealing with municipalities, different levels of government in each state, transportation law. You just name it. That was like they were looking under every rock to dot every I and cross every T, and came probably as close to perfect that they set a model for the world to follow. So hats off to them on the effort to get back to racing, and a lot of people followed that lead. Hopefully that we're further down the road in the area of recovery that we can start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Where we'll ever get back to true, real normal, I don't know. But a lot of people did a lot of hard work on the NASCAR side. But on the same token, go back into the paddock and think about those different car owners that ran businesses and all the hard decisions that they had to make. And everybody has been affected to this thing. You're not living on this planet if you're not.
You know, I just want to reiterate, 33 years in the Cup Series, 1,015 races, and one person estimating 6,000 or so comments of put it out, i.e. put out that flag. Is there a period or an era that you remember more strongly than any other, both whether it be because of what you are involved in or just because you enjoyed it?
Well, I think you'd go through these different periods of transition.
You came in the late 80s?
Yes, sir. Late 80s.
So that was when restrictor plates were coming in.
The race at Talladega in the fall created the need to use this restrictor plate. And that came in. That was changed some of the dynamics of the racing. My role was more on the procedural sides versus the technical side and how it impacted the cars and whatever. But it did affect the performance of the cars, which I was involved in that. You end up having to create some rules. The cars would race slightly different, and the end goal was to help maintain a safe environment for everybody, relatively speaking, with what the car would do. It changed it, and then you had to have the evolution of racing procedures from it, because the races were closer together with the cars and those type of things, and it was evolutionary. At the same time, in the late 80s and early 90s, you started going to electronic scoring, and technology started coming in, and it's never stopped. But it's an evolving cycle that you had to stay up to speed with it, where my own pencil and piece of paper probably couldn't correlate the lineup as quick as that computer did. But we would sit there and agree and agree to disagree and go from there. But there's a lot of technology came in that helped it. It helped the race fans more than they probably realized. And some of the things you're able, as you're broadcasting the race, to bring to them: split times, separation between the cars, instantaneous point systems that you're watching to add more color and information. So there's good things about it. So that period, also, it was a period of time that you had watched, say, like your heroes that you had watched growing up were starting to retire out. They had a much longer career then than I think they do now, and that's the new driver's prerogative. But you know, I grew up being a Richard Petty fan. Remembered the Daytona 500 with David Pearson and Richard Petty. Got to race with David as he was a car owner for his son. Got to know the man. We won't go into the name that he had for me when he would see me in the garage area, but I took it was David, and it was David being David, or Donnie and Bobby Allison, those kind of greats. They were airing out, but I got to go through the transition of watching them start doing other activities on the side, the Darrell Waltrips and the Kel Yarboroughs. You go back to that memorable November day in Atlanta, Richard Petty's last race, where there was some little kid named Jeff Gordon that ran his first race there. And what a career he's had. And you've seen him, you've seen drivers that you would not have probably expected to excel the way they did come into racing. Tony Stewart comes to mind because his background was a lot of dirt and IndyCar. So you've seen these transitional drivers. I think there was, at that same period in the mid-90s, there was an influx of drivers from the Midwest that you hadn't had the opportunity to see. Matt Kenseth, Ryan Newman is one from that era. Mark Martin.
Yeah.
All these greats would come up and show up. So you had this evolutional process that you got to participate in.
Yeah, and I'm sure you've also seen the father and son, as it were, with the Earnhardts and the Elliots. Now Chase following very much in Bill's footsteps, and Bill's been did a couple of Trans Am races with us. So it's nice to see how the fraternity, and Trans Am has a similar fraternity to it. So I think you'll enjoy that aspect.
Well, even I'll go back to going to Road Atlanta. I come down there, I walk in there, and there's Ray Everham. I've known Ray Everham since he was running a modified and working at the old IROC series for Jason Norrie and that group. And there he is getting in a Trans Am car. I said, "You want to sit there?" And say, "Man, you should know better than getting out there." But there's too many drivers that are still enjoying it, and I look forward to meeting some of these, I'll call them characters, that have been around and sitting down. There may be an application for some bench racing at some point to listen to some stories, even though I'm shameful to say that I don't have a great deal of historical knowledge of Trans Am, but Lord, it's still been around 65, 66 years and something like that, and still going strong. So somebody's doing something right.
You're going to say, yeah, absolutely. I wonder whether I thought of you, knowing we were going to do this interview. I thought of you the other night on Tuesday night when the Cup race at Daytona took place, and we all saw the end. And I thought to myself, oh, I wouldn't want to be a race director having to sort out that shenanigans. But I guess that's par for the course, right?
It is something you do, and the ending was very similar to the ending at the Roval, at the first Roval at Charlotte Motor Speedway, that Jimmy Johnson and Martin Truex get together, and here comes Ryan Blaney sneaking through it, but he didn't touch anybody, and the other two didn't win. But I think you told me Ryan had some advice for Chase.
Yeah,
and share that with me, because I forget how you put it.
Well, basically, Blaney said afterwards, if you're going to make a move like that, Chase, you better win the race.
I'm sure they discussed it later on some more, but that's a good way to look at it. And the future's bright with drivers like that, because they kind of got their head screwed on the right way.
Well, and Kyle Busch was in the right place at the right time, where the number 18 seems to be quite a lot anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But let's looking ahead to Trans Am. We're excited. Sebring's just around the corner, literally next week. What places and what venues are you excited to go to?
Some of the ones that I haven't ever got to attend, Laguna Seca's Corkscrew, I'm looking forward to that. Having a rather long distance relationship with Danny Sullivan going back to the IROC years, and then just this past month I reached out to him and sought some of his advice on the Trans Am opportunity, and to me that looks unique. Going to some other racetracks, Road America, that I had worked with people up there, and it's a small world in the racing community. To go to those venues, I had a lot to do with the advanced planning of things, but never made the trip. Same way with Mid Ohio. I'm looking forward to going to as an iconic racetrack as Sebring. Never have been there. I was just totally blown away with the Trans VIR, which is not that far from where I reside, but even closer still to where my mom grew up, an old home farm. So it's a unique area. Look to see some of those travels and see these tracks that I've heard about for years. I've just never been able to attend.
Yeah, I'll bet. And just finally, I mean, are you bringing a team of people that you've worked with before, or are you coming on your own and hoping to sort of work with a group of people anew and sort of form a team or an understanding and a trust between you and your stewards that works and is similar to what you've been doing?
It is just me. I think we've got a real good team with what we've got. Like I said, I did some more of an introductory call session with most of them, one-on-one, just to say hi and look forward to working with you when we get out. I met a couple of them at Road Atlanta's event, and but probably more than I got to talk to, I didn't get to, because that's not the time nor really the place to try to have a conversation. They're there. They were focused on doing what they needed to be doing. My past tells me that's the worst time in the world to go want to visit somebody, because if they're there working, and their time is important to stay on mission, stay on task, and go there. So looking forward to doing that. And we'll go about and see what we need to do.
Well, David, I think I speak on behalf of everybody in Trans Am to say welcome. We're honored to have you, especially with the experience that you bring to this very precious job, an important job to what we do. So welcome, and we look forward to working with you this season and hearing you across the radio waves.
Oh, well, I appreciate you having me on here, and I look forward to working with the teams and the competitors. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for all of us. I am not special by any means. I'm just trying to do my job as good as I can and help the team do their job. And ideally, Jonathan, if we've done it right, you should notice that we were there, and that should be the goal. We're there to promote the drivers and the cars, and we're just kind of there to guide them. And again, if you don't see us there and you don't recognize that we're doing something, we're probably doing a pretty good job. That's going to be the goal.
Listen, David, thank you so much for talking to us. Welcome to the Trans Am family, and we'll see you at Sebring.
All right, sir.